Hello everyone and welcome to BearNews as we take a look back at the Steam Next Fest and all of the fantastic demos that were made available during this period. Now I should note that some of these demos are actually still available, so do make sure you have a look over on Steam. But of course, for those that are no longer there, you will be able to find plenty of videos up on YouTube as well as on this channel covering the contents of those demos, so you'll be able to get a pretty darn good idea of roughly what you'll be getting into. And I should also note that there are actually multiple genres held in this video, including some genres I don't usually play, so this actually has been a real experience for me just tasting all the different potential out there. Now of course it would have been completely impossible to actually play every single game available, so if there are any games that have been missed, then do make sure to leave a comment so other people can find out about them. And by other people, I of course mean me. And a quick note before we jump in. It's something I was saying throughout the demonstrations, but whenever it comes to these titles, particularly the indie ones we're going to look at, wishlisting a title on Steam is a massive help to the developer and promoting the title of their game. It's something that's completely for free, and even if you're only a little bit interested in it, hitting that wishlist button is a massive help. So without further ado, here is a selection of some of the top games to look out for, courtesy of the Steam Next Festival. And to kick us off with a fantastic start is the absolute shocker of a game, Tunic. Now to put this very simple, the reason this game shocked me oh so much is I'm simply not the biggest fan of these style of action, dungeon, fighty games. In fact, the only reason I actually gave this game a shot was that it looked kind of interesting, it was pretty darn cute, and I was listening to Jimi Hendrix at the time. And as we all know full well, you can never go wrong with Hendrix. But just what is Tunic? Well, the game describes itself as an action-adventure indie. And as you can see from these pictures, it has a fantastic art style, though more importantly, quite an expansive map. Now for the demo map, this is apparently an amalgamation of multiple areas from within the actual full game, and I have to say was put together perfectly to showcase all the different environments, the different areas you'll traverse, and some of the enemy types you'll encounter. Taking the itty-bitty foxy Tunic from their unarmed beginnings, and though I did initially skip the stick, getting a sword, a shield, and facing off against some rather tricky opponents as you endeavor to explore the island, unlock new items, and reveal new paths. Now this will certainly sound familiar for those of you who are interested in Metroidvanias, though for me this certainly had more of a feel of Zelda about it. The way the character moves, the lock-on mechanics, the attacks, the defense, it all really does feel like going back to the days of Nintendo 64 and smashing out a bit of Ocarina of Time. Though, thankfully now, I'm significantly better at games and can get past the first dungeon. Oh, let's just have these just destroy each other, that's not the button, I was pressing L! And for such a cute game, I should note for everyone, it was pretty darn punishing. In fact, once more, the first boss continually beat me until I finally figured out how to get the shield. And even then, it took more than an ounce of skill to get past that first encounter, though that was mostly by running away. The variety of enemy types they've introduced, the different equipment and items available all seem interesting and do provide that new state of play, was certainly enough to keep me entertained and coming back for more during the demo, though I will be interested to see just how much this variety is expanded upon as we go towards a proper release of this title, particularly given that if we check over on Steam we can see that the planned release date is to be determined. Now as we take a look at the 2018 trailer, it is interesting to know that the game is also coming out on the Xbox One, and you can certainly tell as the controls, though definitely functional on the computer, just handled a lot nicer when using a controller. And throughout the game we can see these curious markings, this writing in a strange runic-esque language. Now something that's really interesting about this language is it really is a testament to how well they've designed the tutorial sections of the game. You can find these little manuals throughout showing you how to play the game as well as different mechanics within it, and they're all done using this runic style, yet somehow relay all the information needed without an issue. Now I'm not going to deny if you played Zelda then you're pretty much going to know exactly how to play this from the very beginning, but for newcomers the tutorial is definitely going to be helpful. And for veterans, it's just a nice bit of world building you can enjoy as you're playing it. Now one of the links I'm going to put in the description is actually a video released by Finji, the creator, where the developer has made some commentary playing through the game. The dev does a great job of talking through how the game plays, but also goes into some of the different aspects of the design as they do. Now, what really set this game up as so great to play is that it has a nice blend of skill versus equipment. Yes, you're going to need specific equipment to advance the story in certain ways and explore certain areas of the map. However, there are a lot of occasions where actually a skillful play will allow you to progress even if you've yet to acquire the specific items to do so. Now, that does sound like a very simple thing, but it is oh too easy for developers to set up a hard lock system, forcing players to progress via items and removing player skill from the equation. And honestly, it kind of balances out the cuteness of the game by giving that hardcore player mentality, the skill-based progression, more prominence within the title. But unfortunately, we can't sit here and enjoy this beautiful artwork all day, nor the beautiful soundtrack that comes alongside it. And yes, I think talking to devs has really changed my appreciation of gaming. But this is Tunic, a fantastic, immersive, beautiful story coming soon, which really captures the spirit of classic Zelda games while bringing them into a more modern style, mostly with its frame rate. You'll have to explore the world, gaining new items, learning new skills, meeting new enemies, finding their weakness, and exploiting it mercilessly. God, this thing's adorable. Moving on. The next on our merry little list, and changing genre once more, is King Under the Mountain. Now, this was certainly a game that confused me actually quite a bit as I was playing it. And the reason is that so many of the features that really got me interested in it just simply weren't present, or I didn't actually get far enough in order to unlock them. Since this is a demo of a game that isn't even in early access yet, I definitely cannot hold this against the developer, as it seems kind of harsh to judge a game when it still hasn't finished. But at the same time, I can't review what I didn't see. So we're gonna have a look at what was actually in the demo at the time, and then a little look-see at some of the features that they have promised over on their Steam page. The basic gist is you have a realm builder where you're playing as some dwarves, setting off in a randomized map. And that's kind of it. That's all I can say. It's a sandbox. You do what you want, you build the world how you want, you mine and chop trees and such. It's kind of hard to sell these games. There really isn't much to them. But I can say what was in the game was still pretty interesting to play with. There's lots of versatility, and it was a bunch of different considerations when it came to actually designing the layout of the kingdoms I made. That being said, I actually had a ton of issues when trying to set up each of these kingdoms. A common issue seemed to be, first off, no explanation of actually where is a good or bad place to start, what I should be aiming to do, but also exactly what would be needed in order to build each of the structures until I'd already set up the location and told the game to build it. It resulted in a lot of rather annoying starts, where essentially I was wasting materials then having to start again because I just couldn't figure out how to get the stonesmith, I think it was called, working properly. I did eventually figure this out and actually got a little bit of a kingdom going, even getting so far as to having a mushroom mine of my own. It was surprisingly good fun, and I actually really enjoyed mining into mountains as much as possible before the inevitable collapse. Now, if you're into this style of realm builder, I would highly recommend keeping an eye on this title and waiting for another demo to appear. The reason being that I feel a lot of the features just weren't there yet or properly placed in the UI to make them apparent or even attractive at times, and really gave the feeling that this is in early stages of development. It's not a bad thing, and it's actually why having games come out as demos in this style of festival is really useful for not only the gamers but also the devs to see how people react and kind of find new ways to focus things. So I know what you're thinking, Bear, why the heck did you play this game when you kind of knew you were going to dislike it from the very beginning? Well, my minions, listen close. Going over to the Steam page, we have a brilliant list of features that will be coming in the About This Game section. We have the standard simulated world and procedural generation, but we also have additional features and a few that really got me interested in this title and could well lead me to get this when they finally bring out the full release, or at least I can figure out how to access them. So as we scroll down, we'll come across Peaceful Expansion. Now, it's great to see that the developer has acknowledged that some players simply don't want to engage in any form of combat. They just want to peacefully build up their civilization, enjoy the settlements they create, and really immerse themselves in the different characters they've grown to know over that time. But then we come to multiple ways to play, and this is where you strategy gamers are going to want to take note. There are multiple different features within the game, including mining, farming, crafting, and trading. Yes, you will be able to develop your settlement into a trade hub. You'll do this by playing as a selection of different races and factions, each with their own gameplay elements. And they've done this to ensure that players have more versatility in how they design their settlement. Actually, a great example comes in when they're saying a lone wizard building their secret lair with golems, or even a necromancer raising the dead. And as you'd have guessed from those final points, there will be combat. Indeed, the player-driven content section gives us the most information about this, saying that players will be able to opt in to upload their settlements for other players to visit, part of an adventure mode that they're going to introduce, allowing players to take their parties off and attack other settlements. Now, it does state quite clearly that this is a copy and not the original settlement, so you're not actually going to be annoying people or even coming back to find your base destroyed. Instead, you're simply going to be attacking a copy of it, meaning you can go nuts. The party will consist of 5 champions that you will be able to put together from your settlement's population, venturing forth to meet the defenses of your enemies and engage in turn-based tactical combat as you explore and battle through their fortress, providing players that so wish to do so with rare resources that may well even be impossible to acquire outside of this method of play. And on a very nice balancing point, the defending players will also gain from having their copy settlement raided. It's a small note, but it definitely makes a big difference to players, particularly for anyone who's played games like Clash of Clans, where you know you're gonna get hammered eventually. Now, I do have some slight worries with balancing in the fact that some of these resources will otherwise be impossible to gain, suggesting that players that don't opt into this really aren't getting the full experience, though I am tempering that with the fact that the game is still in early development, and we'll have to simply wait and see how all of this pans out. The final thing to note before we move on is that this is a mod-friendly engine, meaning that for many of you, as I have learnt, you will be able to either make your own mods or engage with other people's. Something that once more could provide plenty of variety and a ton of variation to the game, even when you've had your fill of the vanilla experience. For that, I wish you the best of luck, and enjoy the inevitable Game of Thrones release and what's probably already planned, the Lord of the Rings release. Though, to be fair, with a name like King Under the Mountain, I'm pretty sure the game was built with that in mind to begin with. So let's take a quick look at their trailer to see just what a good player could actually do with this game, as you are not going to see it from me. Now, as we go through the trailer, I'm just going to pause it here because you can see we have dungeon crawling. This could be alluding to that player party raiding system, however, it didn't actually say that in the About section of the Steam page. As such, I'm wondering if we won't have a little bit of combat even in that single player gameplay. Hopping along in our merry little tale, we come towards Mechajammer. And I apologize if any noise has gotten through or is getting through now. There's some construction work going on for the roofing of the house next to me, and they've just started hammering out the scaffolding, so from the bottom of this bear's heart, my bad. Mechajammer is a self-proclaimed indie RPG strategy. And I've got to be honest, it was actually really confusing trying to play this game to figure out what genre it would be. Yeah, that's pretty much the most accurate representation I could come up with. Throughout the game, you will switch between real-time movement on the map to a turn-based combat system, where both you and your opponents will act simultaneously. The unique selling point of the game is definitely its art style, being this strange, neo-punk pixelated monstrosity that actually comes together really nicely, providing an excellent ambiance to the game and bringing across a Blade Runner, worn-out cyberpunk world in a way that honestly a lot of post-apocalyptic games have kind of shifted away from, so it was a good breath of fresh air coming into this. And honestly, if any of you have played it, kind of reminded me of Chainsaw Warrior. And the fact that Mechajammer provides open world exploration means that you will be able to delve deep into the underbelly of this city. The developers describe the game as a cyberpunk horror CRPG set on a grim future colony world. and state that the game uses simultaneous turn-based combat to create real-time tactics with the precision of turn-based controls. And I've got to say that, as weird as it sounds, it actually works really well. As with all games of this style, I do kind of wish there was an undo button, but the fact that everything happens simultaneously means that's kind of not an option unless you're willing to save scum. But having little things like clicking next to an enemy when you mean to attack them, you notice the damage pretty darn quickly, and will be yearning for the undo, though at the same time, it provides a lot of character to the game, and those frustrations really do build up to give you quite an experience, quite a roleplay experience, one may say. Now, as we watch some of the parts of this demo, you'll be able to see some of the biomes that you will inhabit throughout the game, going from extremely claustrophobic interiors, as well as some barely spacious urban environments, all the way through to much more open jungles and forests, all of which providing their own considerations to gameplay, seeing as a fair amount of the exploration of this game is going to include stealth mechanics, or at least they will if you've spec'd your characters for this to work. By having these different biomes, you'll need to approach each situation differently, providing plenty of variety to gameplay. Holding off in the darkness, sneaking around corners, keeping nice and quiet to avoid alerting enemies within buildings, or rushing up to walls and using them as cover as you engage in an all-out firefight, with the option to jump into the grass, break line of sight, and get up on there and bop them in the bonts. There are plenty of options available, and the fact that you have such customization in your character creation means that you're going to be able to play this game in a unique manner each time you come to it. And that's without even bringing the concept of trying to talk your way out of a situation, which is just yet another option in the bounty that is Mechajammer. Now, unfortunately, I do have a couple of gripes that came up during the demo. For some reason, characters and items wouldn't respawn, and therefore when dying, I was unable to actually fully use the squad mechanics because owing to that clicking the wrong place, they all got smashed pretty darn early. And the result was that I had to kind of go through the game on my own. It was a bit of a fiasco, but it was also really fun to try. As such, unfortunately, I can't say much for the squad mechanics other than the AI will roughly control them to do what you tell them to do, which is to say if you put a unit into a guard position, they will remain with you, whereas if you put them into the attack position, they will charge at the enemy and usually get shot in about 3 steps. So making sure you put the ones you don't like in there. Our next up, and shifting pace completely, we turn to the novel charms of a Reverie Knight's tactics. Now, because comparisons make things just significantly easier, I'm straight away going to connect this with the obvious Banner Saga. So shifting the style completely and dealing with a fantasy world, one that has some rather strange components to it, mostly in the form of how their religion works, but also some of the cultural distinctions. Thankfully, for a game that's pretty heavily based on reading through vast quantities of text, they really have put some time and effort into planning out the lore and connecting things up in a pretty reasonable manner. I know there is definitely an unfortunateness that in the demo you're kind of playing from the beginning, so you have to go through a ton of lore in order to finally get to the game. It was still really enjoyable actually getting to the game, but also going through a fair amount of that text. And I do feel that given a full story and real dedication to it, it would become a lot more enticing to take the time to really read into and start picking up on what all the characters are doing and the overall world building that has gone into this. Now, I state this entirely for the fact that it's going to put off a ton of people that there is a lot of text in a game, so you really do need to know it going forward, as this is kind of a make or break situation for most gamers. So if you're not interested in reading through stuff, just skip ahead to the next game. But for those of you who are still hanging around, well, for the combat, this game is pretty darn solid. There's plenty to consider in terms of moving your character around the environment via a standard turn-based, grid-based system. And as this is a tactics game, your facing is going to make a pretty big difference in how your encounters go, atop the inevitable environmental considerations. Moving your characters around to try and attack the rears of your enemies, or just throwing them directly into environmental hazards to get those easy wins, as well as looking to chain skills and even chain your character actions by getting them on either side of an opponent to perform special attacks and take the enemy down faster. Elemental effects, resistances, and damage are all going to play a part as you go about each mission, gaining experience, developing your characters, and trying to get that new equipment to better bolster their abilities and really push this story forward. And in gaining victory, gaining the experience that goes along with it. The RPG mechanics of the game are a little bit limited, but it seems like they're doing this so as to force more consideration into how you progress your character. With only 3 slots for equipment and 3 slots for skills, you're really going to be having to plan out how you build your characters and specialize them towards specific styles of play. Owing to the large amount of text and the limitations of this being part of the festival, unfortunately I wasn't able to see the full extent of the morality system in the game. Throughout the story, you will be presented with options which are considered either to be chaotic or orderly, and by choosing these options you will affect the outcomes of later parts of the story. Now, to what extent this really changes things, I honestly can't say, but it does appear they have some fair ambitions for this, so once more this will be something to keep your eye on, as currently all we know is that there are several choices which will have an effect upon the outcome of the story, as well as the reaction of certain characters. But currently that is all, and the only effect it really had for me was a small change in dialogue, owing to the choice of going to a party rather than preparing to leave, which I would still argue is the kinda thing to do, but apparently this is considered chaotic, providing the avid tactics strategy fan plenty of opportunities to engage with a game that honestly could see you going for quite a darn long time. Essentially, it's just going to come down to whether you fall into the niche of someone who enjoys both an RPG style, novel style game, as well as enjoying a tactical RPG. Now that niche is actually pretty well suited, as plenty of tactical RPGs have a huge amount of story in them, so if you enjoy that style of game, I'd certainly be giving this a look, particularly as the art style and animations are actually pretty darn impressive. And though certainly some of it is not to my appeal, the overall feel and the way that the characters and the environments come together more than makes up for any individual dislike I have for the artistic choice. Although almost all of that dislike is entirely from the weird toes that they freak me out, people. I cannot, no more. Moving on, next game. Our next most glorious venture is that of Undungeon. Now the demo for Undungeon is actually still available right now at the point of recording, so it might be worth having a look over at the Steam page just for anyone who wants to check this game out. Particularly as if you're looking for a seriously large game to lay your fingers into, this one is certainly shaping up to be just that. The game describes itself as an action-adventure indie RPG, and it definitely lives up to those names. The art style is fantastic pixel perfection, which if you follow me over on Twitter you know has become a bit of a thing for me. I don't really know where it's come from. But the reason it works so well in this game is it's all based within a post-apocalyptic society. Following an event known as the Great Shift, this science fiction story has the player embark as a herald upon multiple different iterations of Earth throughout a multi-dimensional storyline. All of these dimensions then being connected by the hub, also known as the Herald's Undercover Bay. Nice. But the real reason to take a look at this game is for the actual gameplay itself. There are plenty of things to consider, and that's not just attacking your enemy nor the weapons and upgrades at hand. You'll also need to think of buffs and debuffs, as well as actually how you're using your items, as even things such as healing potions, once released, actually have to be attacked in order to gain the benefits from them. Meaning that during the time you release them, an enemy combatant could actually beat you to it. It's a neat if somewhat infuriating consideration, but it definitely gives a certain unique feel to the game. Though the real aspect of gameplay you'll want to take a look at, and honestly spend a fair amount of time going over, is going to be the customization and crafting systems. Customization within the game is done by, well, a rather grim method. You're going to be exchanging different parts of your body and even the internal organs of your character so as to gain the advantages from those upgrades. It feels really weird saying that. As well as then gaining equip nodes and runes to further enhance the abilities of your character and customize them towards your unique playstyle. And all of these link into the crafting system, disassembling basic materials will provide you with the raw resources to go ahead and make your own unique items, be that organs, weapons, gear, or consumables. Now, given that in the modern day, things like crafting systems is kind of par on the course, we do need to bear in mind that this is an indie game, and the sheer extent of features is really quite impressive, especially considering the final factor and the key feature that this game will provide you. The sheer space you will be able to explore and adventure within an open world map is absolutely insane. From the hub, you have multiple tiers and multiple destinations you can go to, and within those destinations you have multiple destinations you can visit within it, as well as a plethora of characters to interact with, talking with them and gaining quests to go out on your adventures, as well as of course trading to gain new material, or even just sell off your old stuff to get that money in for the next time. And if you're not feeling quite so benevolent, you can actually destroy their camps and send them off into the wastes. All of these different actions and how you play the game will affect the fates of the characters as well as the entire dimension that you're playing in, meaning depending on how you play, each run can be extremely unique. And you'll definitely want to be making multiple runs to explore everything the world has to offer, delving deeper and deeper into each dimension so as to reveal the full grotesquerie of Undungeon. Now, there are plenty more games in the demonstrations, so do make sure to go have a look at them for all the games that came out in the Tokyo Games Festival, as well as just some general demo releases from some slightly larger companies. But I hope you've gained a better idea of the games mentioned here, and hopefully found something that can interest you. But that takes us to the end of this roundup. Thanks to this sheer quantity of demos and the limited time span in which we could actually play them, inevitably I will have missed parts of the games and would really like to know what you guys found and any new cool features you found within them. And of course, since there were so many games released, if there are any that you feel need some particular attention, once more, dropping us a line and giving me a heads up would be really nice, because I genuinely want to know about all the new games coming out, as I'm basically just that dog from Up and I'm constantly getting distracted by new stuff. And if you're new to the channel and you've enjoyed what you've seen, don't forget to have a quick look at the profile to see if this is something for you and possibly joining in the fun. And of course, I will always appreciate people doing those lovely YouTube things of putting likes, leaving comments, and telling all your friends about that weird bear who spends way too much time talking to indie devs lately. Either way, thanks a ton for checking us out, and as always, peace out.